What if the road you're driving on never lets you leave? When Jess Palmer takes a shortcut to escape a storm, he finds himself trapped in a nightmarish highway that defies time, logic, and reality. Gas stations vanish, road signs lie, and the only way forward might be a lie too. Haunted by stranded souls and hunted by unseen forces, Jess must follow cryptic rules to survive a labyrinth of endless asphalt. Backroads isn't just a journey. It's a one-way descent into something no GPS can map, and no one ever escapes. I haven't seen a single soul for hours, and yet I swear I saw someone watching me from the trees. The sun was starting to rot on the horizon, bleeding orange and red into the Louisiana sky. Jess Palmer squinted against the light as it shimmered across the cracked windshield of his '98 Toyota Tacoma. The air smelled like wet pine and mosquito spray. He'd been driving for nearly 9 hours, eyelids heavy, muscles aching, and despite the staleness of his energy drinks and the stabbing pressure in his lower back, he couldn't shake the feeling that stopping would be worse. Stopping meant thinking, then thinking meant remembering. He was somewhere between nowhere and nothing. The road beneath his tires was 2 narrow lanes of worn asphalt, flanked by an endless blur of trees, each one looking identical to the last. No towns, no gas stations, no billboards. Even his phone, tossed carelessly into the passenger seat, had stopped trying to find a signal 2 counties ago. Jess reached over and killed the radio, which had been hissing white noise for the last 45 minutes. The silence settled in instantly, thick and heavy, like fog rolling over a lake at dawn. That was when he saw it. A break in the tree line. A glimpse of something strange. To his left, behind a curtain of tangled brush and branches, was a narrow road, paved with moss-covered stone. It was just there, like it had always been there. Though Jess had driven past this area more times than he could count. He'd taken these back highways since he was 16. The route to the lake, the one he and his mom used to take for weekend getaways before she died, was practically muscle memory. But he had never, not once, seen this stone-paved road. It was subtle, almost hidden. If he hadn't glanced at just the right moment, he would have missed it entirely. Curiosity flared, tiredness forgotten. He slowed the truck and pulled onto the gravel shoulder, staring into the gap between trees. The entrance looked like a memory someone had buried deep, familiar and foreign all at once. There was no sign, no gate, no logical reason why he hadn't noticed it before. Just a narrow, overgrown path, flanked by tall pines and wild underbrush. Jess hesitated, the engine idling beneath him. He should have turned around, gone home, slept. Instead, he put the truck in drive and nudged forward, the tires crunching over dead leaves and forgotten gravel. The undergrowth resisted at first, scraping against the body of the truck like claws on a coffin. But soon it opened up into a surprisingly well-preserved road, the stone glinting faintly beneath layers of moss and thyme. After a few minutes of driving, Jess started to feel displaced. The sky above remained mostly clear, the clouds soft and pink with the last light of day. But the world around him had shifted. The road no longer curved or intersected. It simply stretched out in a straight, unbroken line, fading into the trees ahead. His phone was still dead. The dashboard clock blinked 6:66. He blinked, then blinked again. He was gone, just 7:28. Maybe he was more tired than he realized. The farther he drove, the quieter everything became, unnaturally so. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. There were no bugs, no birds, no rustling branches, just the hum of his tires against the stone and the occasional squeak of his suspension. The stillness pressed in around him made the air feel thick, damp. Half an hour passed, then an hour. The road didn't change. He should have turned around, but pride and curiosity kept his foot on the gas. It was stupid, the kind of decision people in horror movies made, but something in him refused to admit this road wasn't real. Then, finally, something shifted. Up ahead, the trees parted slightly to reveal a low stone bridge. Beyond it was what looked like an old train overpass, rusted steel beams and cracked concrete draped with vines. The bridge didn't end the road, instead it passed under it. A tunnel. Jess slowed as he approached. The opening looked too small for a full-size pickup, but his headlights reached through the gloom and touched the other side. Light. It wasn't long, just 100 feet or so. The tunnel was wet, slick with moss and condensation. The walls sweated. The air smelled like mold and old iron. He hesitated only a moment before inching forward. It felt like driving through a throat. The moment he emerged, something was different. Not just the lighting or the road surface or the silence. Something beneath it all had changed. He didn't know how to explain it, but it was like reality had clicked one notch off center. The stone road had given way to aged asphalt, cracked and worn, with no paint lines or traffic signs. Ahead, the road stretched out in both directions, punctuated by the occasional fork that veered off into the woods. No mile markers, no intersections. He checked his phone again, still no signal. The battery now at 8%. Jess glanced in the rearview mirror. The tunnel was gone. Just trees. Solid. Undisturbed. No sign of the bridge or the stone road behind him. A deep breath caught in his throat. He drove on. Each minute felt longer than the last. There was nothing but empty road, endless trees, and the mounting sense that he'd crossed some kind of invisible line, one that wasn't meant to be crossed. His thoughts spiraled. Maybe he'd missed a turn. Maybe there had been a sign and he just didn't see it. But deep down he knew better. He hadn't turned once. He hadn't had the chance. At last, the fatigue hit him like a sledgehammer. His hands trembled on the wheel. The fuel gauge dipped closer to empty, and still, no end in sight. He pulled over. The sky was purple-black now, the kind of darkness that eats moonlight. He stepped out of the truck and stretched. The air was colder than it should have been. Still no bugs, no sounds. Jess leaned against the hood, listening to the silence. Then came the softest sound. Crunch. A single footstep in the woods behind him. Slow. Deliberate. His breath caught. He turned. Nothing but trees. Then another step. Closer. And then silence again. He rushed back into the cab, slammed the door, and locked it. The handle clicked, and for a second he swore he heard a low exhale, like breath against glass. His hands trembled as he reached for the glove box, fingers brushing the cold metal of the pistol he kept stashed there. Not for use, just for insurance. Something moved at the edge of the trees, but when he blinked, it was gone. Jez stayed in the cab with the dome light off, his body stiff. Gun across his lap, he counted each inhale, trying to convince himself it had just been an animal, a deer, maybe even a raccoon. Not a person, not someone or something watching him from the trees. He waited 10 minutes, then 20. Nothing moved outside. Eventually, when his nerves stopped screaming, he decided he had to keep going. The last thing he needed was to fall asleep and wake up to something standing outside the window. He turned the key in the ignition. It groaned once, then roared back to life, headlights slicing through the dark. He didn't notice until he was already moving that the road ahead looked exactly like the road behind. Same cracked asphalt, same tree line, same slight leftward dip. He drove another 20 minutes and still hadn't seen anything. No landmarks, no curves, no intersections, no life. The dread came slowly, like oil seeping under a door. He turned on the high beams, leaned forward, squinted. Nothing. Just more road and more dark. Just began to accelerate. He wasn't sure why, just a desperate need to outrun whatever this was. The road stayed silent under his tires, unchanging, infinite. He drove for nearly an hour. Still nothing. Then he saw it. A sign of hope. A light. Faint, but there. A flicker just beyond the next rise. His heart kicked. He leaned forward. A building? A porch light? A street lamp? As he crested the hill, the light vanished. The road dropped into a shallow valley, empty and still. He slowed. It had felt real. Hadn't it? Jess continued another few miles until the fuel light blinked on. He cursed under his breath, eyes darting to the gauge. Less than a quarter tank. No gas stations, no stores, no people. He should have filled up before taking the detour, but how could he have known he was leaving the world behind? He had to turn back. That much was clear now. He spun the truck around, tires crunching loose gravel. But the moment he did, a terrible realization struck him. The trees were different. The curve of the road, wrong. The tunnel was gone. The stone road, gone. In every direction, the world looked the same. He was somewhere else. Jess gripped the wheel tighter and started retracing his route, watching for any sign of the tunnel, the overpass, anything. But it was like the road had rewritten itself behind him. He passed fork after fork, all unmarked, and every single one seemed vaguely familiar, and yet utterly wrong. An hour passed, then another. His gas gauge hovered near empty. A tightness clamped his chest. Eventually, he pulled off to the side again, unable to keep pushing forward without falling asleep. He left the engine off this time to conserve fuel. The interior of the truck cooled rapidly, and he curled up on the back seat, gun still in hand. He closed his eyes. He didn't sleep. Not really. Every few minutes he'd jolt awake, thinking he'd heard something. A knock, a breath, the soft hiss of whispering just outside the cab. At some point he must have dozed off, because when he opened his eyes again, the sky was a dull gray. Just before dawn. He sat up, stretching. His stomach growled. He remembered the energy bars in the glove box and tore into one with shaking fingers. It tasted like cardboard and regret. With the daylight returning, the road seemed less threatening, but only just. A wrongness still clung to the edges of everything. The trees stood too still. The air felt stale. Jess started the truck and pulled back onto the road. He drove for nearly an hour before something new finally appeared. A gas station. It rose out of the horizon like a mirage, squat and weathered, with a flickering sign that simply read, "Last Stop." Jess stared, heart thudding. He slowed, nearly missed the turn, then pulled into the gravel lot. The building was small, maybe 30 feet wide, with 2 old-fashioned pumps out front and a convenience store behind yellowed glass windows. He parked. The place looked abandoned. No cars, no signs of life. But the pump lit up when he pulled in. A dull green glow. With shaky hands, Jess stepped out, inserted his card, which the machine didn't ask for, and began fueling. The gas smelled normal. The nozzle clicked after just under 10 gallons. As he hung the pump, he heard static. He turned. A TV inside the store flickered on. The screen showed a smiling news anchor, a woman with too perfect hair and a stiff artificial tone. The image was grainy, but her voice rang clearly through an unseen speaker. Today's forecast. Clear skies across the Backroads region. Please be advised, stranded activity has increased in State 2. Remain on paved roads. Avoid unmarked paths. And, don't forget, Last Stop Fuel closes at midnight on Sundays. Thank you and travel safe. Jess stared, heart hammering. Backroads region? He whispered. No channel marker, no network logo, just that woman, smiling mechanically. The screen faded to black. Silence. He didn't realize he was backing away from the door until he hit his own truck. Everything screamed wrong. Jess jumped into the cab and slammed the door. He didn't wait. He turned the key and the truck roared to life. The road ahead was still empty, but he had fuel. That was enough. He drove. And drove. And drove. The road did not change. It did not curve. Did not end. No towns, no gas stations, no houses. The only difference now was the noise. Behind him. At first it was a soft scrape, like footsteps on gravel. Then a wet, dragging sound. Then whispers. He didn't dare look. He pressed harder on the gas, but the noise kept pace. Closer. Closer. Jess didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Until finally, a loud metallic click behind him. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, and there in the bed of the truck was a pale, hunched figure. Skin like melted wax, eyes black and bottomless, Its lips peeled back in a smile made of too many teeth. They didn't walk like people. They moved like animals trying to remember how to be men. The thing in the bed of the truck didn't flinch. It just crouched there, staring through the rear window as Jess gripped the steering wheel hard enough to make the bones in his fingers ache. His breath came in ragged gulps. He didn't dare look again, didn't dare move too suddenly. He kept driving. 20, 30 seconds passed, then a minute. The mirror now showed nothing but an empty truck bed. Gone. Jess exhaled a stuttering breath he didn't realize he was holding. His arms shook. Sweat traced cold lines down his back despite the coolness of the cabin. Maybe it hadn't been real, a hallucination, a product of exhaustion and stress. But he knew better. There'd been weight in the back of the truck. He'd felt the suspension shift. The thing had been there. The engine hummed low as he pressed further into the road's embrace. Trees blurred by. The pale morning light filtered through the canopy above, but it didn't reach him. Not really. Nothing out here felt like morning. It felt like a memory pretending to be one. Eventually, the road dipped, revealing a wide clearing ahead, and there, impossibly, stood the same gas station. Last stop fuel. Jess hit the brakes hard. No, it couldn't be. He'd driven straight for hours, never turned around, never even slowed down. And yet here it was again. Same gravel lot, same old-fashioned pumps, same flickering green signage humming faintly in the early light. He coasted into the lot, engine idling, staring at the windows. The place looked wrong. Different. The grime on the windows was smeared now, like something had pressed up against the glass. One of the fluorescent tubes overhead was swinging slightly, as if it had just been disturbed. There were scratches along the side of the building, long, thin gouges that looked disturbingly like fingernail trails. He opened the door slowly, gun tucked into his waistband. No wind, no birds, not even the sound of his own breathing seemed to carry here. He moved toward the store. The glass door was partially ajar. A soft bell jingled as he stepped inside, though no one was there to hear it. The air was thick with something sour. Oil, mildew, and copper. Rows of metal shelves stood half empty, their contents bizarrely curated. Dozens of canned peaches, several boxes of nails, old jugs of windshield wiper fluid. No chips, no soda, nothing fresh. On the counter sat an unplugged register, a dusty ashtray, and a stack of old road maps with complimentary stamped in faded ink. Behind the counter, the TV flickered to life. Jess flinched, hand dropping to the pistol. The screen showed the same woman as before, that anchor with the plastic smile and glassy eyes. But this time, her smile twitched. Subtly, almost amused. "Good morning, Jess," she said. His blood turned to ice. No title card, no weather map, no channel logo, just her, smiling wider than before. "We hope you slept well. Today's forecast is warm, dry, and mostly safe. Please be advised, activity has increased in your area. Avoid unpaved trails and direct visual contact. You are now in State 1. Welcome." The screen went black. Jess stumbled back, knocking over a rack of chewing gum and postcards. He stared at the blank screen, breath shallow. She'd said his name. His goddamn name. That was no coincidence. No broadcast glitch. That thing was talking to him. He left the store in a rush, heart hammering. He didn't notice the bloodstains on the pavement until he nearly stepped in them, a streak of brown red leading behind the building. Something dragged. Something crawled. Jess didn't investigate. He didn't want to know. He just got back into the truck, turned the key, and drove. This time, he didn't even glance at the fuel gauge. Whatever logic had governed the world he'd known was no longer in play, and he had a sinking feeling that the road, this impossible, circular, predatory road, wanted him to learn its rules. It wasn't just about being lost. It was about being watched. About 10 miles later, he pulled over again. Not from exhaustion, but because he saw something he hadn't before. A sign. A real one. Weather-worn, riddled with rust, nearly buried in the grass. You are now leaving State 0. Good luck. Beneath it, scratched in with what looked like a knife. Stranded, don't hide in State 1. He took a picture with his phone. Not that it mattered. The screen still showed no bars, but he needed proof. For himself, if nothing else. State 0. State 1. What did it mean? He thought of the words the woman had said. Avoid unpaved trails. Direct visual contact. Increased activity. Was this some kind of game? Or a test? He got back on the road. The trees began to change. Slowly at first. The oaks and cypress gave way to twisted black elms. Thinner and darker than before. Their bark looked burnt. Their roots like skeletal fingers clawing from the soil. Even the birds had vanished. Jess passed another fork, this one leading to a gravel path shrouded in vines. He didn't take it. But for a brief, terrible moment, he saw movement at the edge. Something tall and thin, wearing what looked like a coat made of skin. He kept driving, and tried not to think about the fact that the path he was on hadn't curved once since dawn. The gas station was gone, but the TV was still speaking inside my head. The farther Jess drove, the less the road resembled anything built by human hands. It still followed a straight line, yes, but the pavement had darkened, faded from gray to something closer to charcoal, the kind of shade you'd expect on a burned-out parking lot. Lines of tar snaked across its surface like veins, pulsing slightly in the corner of his vision when he looked too long. The trees, too, were wrong. No longer arranged by nature's chaos, but standing in rows now, like sentinels, equidistant, silent, watching. He tried to focus on the road ahead. The sun was crawling toward the treetops again. Evening. He'd driven all day, and yet the clock on his dashboard read only 2:17 p.m. He tapped it. No change. Just that unsettling number, frozen, as if time had chosen to stop participating. And still, no tunnels, no houses, no people, just the endless press of asphalt, forest, and the tension in his chest. His eyes burned. He pulled to the side, shut the engine, and let his head fall back. He needed sleep. Real sleep. But sleep was when the voices crept in. He cracked the window to get some air, but all it let in was the faint scent of rot. Not fresh decay, something older. Like mildewed flesh and sour leaves. Just reached for the glove box. Inside were the usual travel items. Old receipts, a crumpled map of the state highways, and the pistol. He stared at it for a long time before shutting the box again. He leaned forward, cracked his back, and tried not to think about the thing in the bed of the truck, or the TV voice, or the name State 1. That was when he heard it again. The crunch. Soft, far away, but unmistakable. He froze. Then came another, closer. Jess ducked, peeking through the side mirror. Nothing but trees. He held his breath. Another sound. This time not from the forest, but from above. The unmistakable metallic creak of something stepping on the roof of the cab. Jess's skin turned to ice. He didn't move, not even a twitch. His fingers crept toward the glove box again. The roof creaked once more. Then silence. No breathing, no movement, just gone. He threw open the glove box, grabbed the pistol, and bolted from the truck, circling around it to find nothing. No tracks, no dents, no sign of what had made that sound, but the driver's side door, scratched. Deep curved gouges like fingernails run through soft clay, and written in what looked like dried blood in shaky, looping letters, "You're not the first." Jess backed away, heart pounding in his throat. He didn't understand. Who was writing this? Why? When? He needed answers. He needed something real. And like a divine curse answering a desperate prayer, he found it. About 5 miles further, the trees opened again. Another gas station, but not the same. This one was older, crumbling. Its neon sign flickered weakly, half the letters dead. The pumps were rusted. disconnected from their hoses. The door was nailed shut with wooden slats, the windows smeared with soot or worse, but the parking lot was full of cars, at least 10, all abandoned, some with shattered windshields, others with doors left ajar, keys still in the ignition. Jess coasted in slowly, foot hovering over the brake. The silence was unbearable. He parked near a burnt orange Ford Bronco and stepped out, gun drawn. His boots crunched glass. Wind blew a loose receipt across the pavement. A receipt dated June 19th, 1972. He checked the first car. Empty. The second. Blood on the back seat. The third. The back window painted from the inside with a frantic message. Don't let them in at night. He turned at a sudden sound. A fluttering of static. The TV. Again. Inside the boarded gas station, the screen flickered to life through the grime-covered window. Same woman, same voice. But this time, her smile was gone. Attention all travelers, she said. Stranded are active in your area. Repeat, stranded are active. Seek shelter. Lock all doors. Do not respond to voices. Estimated local sunset 6:09 p.m. Good luck, Jess. Static. Silence. Jess backed away from the building like it might explode. He sprinted to the truck, slammed the door, locked it. His hands fumbled the keys, breath ragged. The sun was low now, blood orange against the horizon. A deep red haze bled into the trees. The shadows stretched long and thin across the lot. And then they arrived. Shapes, moving through the trees, hunched, slow, not running, not charging, but approaching. Dozens of them. Some crawled, others limped. A few stood upright but twitched as if their bodies had forgotten how to hold themselves together. They emerged from between the cars. Jess turned the key. The engine sputtered. He cursed, tried again. Nothing. Click. The air grew colder, closer. He screamed, slammed the key again. The engine roared. Headlights snapped on and caught them in full. They were human-shaped, but only just. Skin white and wet-looking. Faces sagging, some featureless, others twisted. One had a mouth but no eyes. Another had no mouth, but his throat bulged and rippled as if trying to scream. Jess floored the gas. The truck surged forward, smashing into one of them. It flew backward, cracking against a windshield and leaving a thick smear behind. The others scattered, limbs flailing, screeching with sounds that didn't belong in the throats of men. He tore out of the lot, tires screeching, body rattling. He didn't stop, didn't look back. He drove until his lungs stopped burning, until the static in his ears faded, until the trees stopped shivering, and even then, he didn't stop. The knock came just as Jess let his eyes flutter shut. A sharp, rhythmic bang, bang, bang on the window, like someone drumming with bones. He jolted awake, hands flying to the pistol, wedged between his seat and center console. Outside, framed in the dying orange light of late afternoon, stood a man in a tattered denim jacket, a ball cap pulled low over a face weathered like worn leather. His beard was patchy, but his eyes were sharp. Sharp in the way someone only gets when they've seen too much, and somehow survived it. The man held up both hands, palms out. Jess rolled the window down a crack. "You're on back roads," the man said, voice hoarse and calm. "Name's Rob. You want to live past tonight, you better come with me." Jess blinked. "Back roads?" Rob jerked his thumb over his shoulder. "No time. We've got 10 minutes of light left. After that, they come." Jess didn't need more convincing. He shoved the door open and followed Rob across a stretch of cracked dirt lot, down a barely there path lined with bramble to a rusted door, tucked behind a collapsed billboard for Chester's corn maze. Open all fall. Inside was a tight shelter made of corrugated metal, patched with duct tape and blankets. A cot. A lantern. A wall covered in notebook paper scrawled with notes in thick Sharpie. And a map, not one Jess had ever seen before. It was hand-drawn, chaotic, and wrong. Roads looping into nothing, symbols like eyes and arrows pointing inward. The word State 1 appeared more than once, usually crossed out. Rob shut the door and latched 5 bolts behind them. Jess dropped into the chair beside the cot. His hands were shaking. What were those things? He managed. Rob didn't answer right away. Instead, he poured Jess a lukewarm canteen of water and offered a bite of something that looked like jerky but smelled like despair. "They're called stranded," Rob said finally. "Some of them used to be like us. The most weren't ever human to begin with." Jess's throat tightened. "This isn't just a bad turn off the highway, is it?" Rob let out a dry laugh. "No, son. You turned onto a place that ain't even on maps. A set of roads that feeds on memory, grief, bad decisions. Doesn't matter why you came here, only matters what you do next." Jess looked around again. "And you've survived here how long?" Rob held up 3 fingers. 3 winters, but I wasn't alone when I came. My sister was with me. She didn't make it past the 3rd tunnel. That shut Jess up. Rob sat across from him and grabbed a notebook from the floor. "This is what'll keep you alive," he said, "the rules." Jess leaned in. "Rule 1, Rob began. Don't trust signs. Real directions here come as feeling, not words. If the road looks too perfect, you're being led somewhere." Jess nodded. "Rule 2, Rob said, flipping the page. When the radio speaks your name, answer only once. More than that, and it learns your voice. Then it can call you." Jess's stomach churned. He remembered the gas station. To the TV, Rob continued. "Rule 3, there are tunnels. Some are safe, most aren't. If it echoes when you whisper, go around. If it absorbs your voice, walk fast and don't look back." Jess's hands were sweating. "Rule 4, every 5th gas station lies. You'll know which one by the price on pump 3. If it says $0.00, leave immediately. It's not real." Jess swallowed. "What happens if I don't follow the rules?" Rob stared at him long, then turned and peeled back a sheet nailed to the wall. Behind it, scrawled in black soot, was a name. Jess Palmer. Written days ago. Jess backed away like it might bite him. "Found that yesterday," Rob muttered. "Didn't know who it belonged to until you showed up." "That's not possible," Jess whispered. "I only just got here." Rob shook his head. "You think time works straight in here? That's cute." The lantern flickered. A low rumble passed overhead. Like a plane, except deeper. More organic. Jess looked up, heart thudding. Rob didn't even flinch. "Rule number 5, he said. "Don't go outside after dusk unless something's on fire or bleeding to death. Even then, think twice." Jess rubbed his temples. "This is insane. I'm not supposed to be here. My GPS glitched, that's all. I just need to backtrack." "You can't," Rob interrupted. "Not unless the road lets you. And it never does for free." Jess looked down at the notebook, at the list. So many rules, too many. "How do you know all this?" he asked. Rob didn't answer right away. He pulled his cap off, revealing a deep scar running from temple to jaw. His ear was half melted. "I've made mistakes," Rob said. "A lot of them. I watched a girl disappear into a mirror that wasn't there. Watched a man eat a whole loaf of bread that kept growing until it started bleeding. I've heard phone calls from my own voice warning me not to go places, and still went." Jess felt his heart beat against his ribs like a trapped animal. He finally asked the question that had haunted him since the first tunnel. "Why me?" Rob looked up, his eyes now distant, cold. "Because Backroads calls people who've lost their anchor," he said. "You're drifting, regretting something, grieving, angry, guilty. Doesn't matter which. The road feeds on it." Jez tried to argue, but couldn't. He hadn't spoken to his sister in years, hadn't visited his mother's grave, had let people down. The road had smelt it. "Then what now?" he whispered. Rob nodded toward the map. "We head for the 3rd turn. There's a house that shouldn't exist. Inside it is the man who writes the rules. We need to find him before they do." Jess's mouth was dry. "Who's they?" Rob's voice dropped low. "The ones who erased the people who broke them." Rob was already moving by first light. Jess barely slept. His dreams had been stained with static and whispers in his own voice, but there was something about Rob's certainty, his movements like ritual, that kept Jess from collapsing. That, and the growing feeling that something was watching them, even inside the shelter. They packed light. Rob's rulebook, a knife, flashlights, the kind that didn't run on batteries, a small bottle of salt, and a folded photo of a woman Jess guessed was Rob's sister. He never asked. By 6:12 a.m., they were walking into a fog that didn't burn off with the sun. "This is the third turn," Rob said as they passed a mile marker that read 3/3. "We need to move fast. Once we hit the railroad crossing, you don't stop walking, no matter what you hear. You stop, you stay." Jess nodded, though his heart was pounding. Asphalt gave way to gravel. The trees closed in, oak and birch warped by time and rot. The bird song had stopped. No wind. Just the sound of shoes on stone and the quiet groan of the forest holding its breath. They reached the tracks. An old railway slicing the road in half, rusted, half buried under moss and time. But as Jess stepped on them, he felt it, a vibration too deep to be real, like the world shivering in place. "Don't look left," Rob whispered. Jess didn't ask why. They crossed in silence. On the other side was something that shouldn't have been there. A mailbox, standing by itself, no house attached. The flag was up. Rob slowed. "Don't touch it," Jess whispered, recalling some unspoken rule. But Rob frowned. This wasn't here before. Inside the mailbox was a photo of Jess, not recent, years ago. College graduation, him and his sister, arms wrapped around each other before everything broke. On the back, "You left her. The road remembers." Jess nearly dropped it. His pulse exploded behind his eyes. "Keep walking," Rob said, voice like a whip. So they did. The road twisted unnaturally, more like intestine than path. The fog thickened. Rob began muttering under his breath, a litany of rules like armor. Don't accept food past dusk. Don't acknowledge mirrors after mile 4. Don't believe voices that say your name in pairs. Then Jess saw it. A figure lying just off the shoulder of the road, human, or what used to be. He stepped closer before Rob could stop him. The body was twisted, as if crushed and pulled in opposite directions, limbs bent wrong, face smeared with ash and moss. But there was one undeniable thing. He wore a county sheriff's uniform, badge cracked in half. "Local?" Jess whispered. Rob crouched beside the body, then stood quickly. "It's Rourke." "Who?" "The sheriff who went looking for me 3 years ago. Guess he finally found the road." Jess's mind reeled. "He's been here all that time?" Rob didn't answer. He pulled something from the man's pocket, a map, different from his own. On it was a path drawn in red marker, loops, X's. One word circled in ink, dead end. Jess stared. "What does that mean?" Rob scanned the horizon. "We're close to it, but there's no way to know what kind of dead end it is." The moment he said it, the air shifted. No wind, no sound. But something moved in the fog ahead. Then came the sound. Dragging, wet, deliberate. A figure emerged. It was not walking. It was pulling itself forward. Arms long and jointless, face covered by a burlap mask stitched with red thread. The smell of rotting pine and kerosene hit them like a wall. Jess froze. Rob didn't. "Run!" They tore down the road. Behind them, the thing gave chase. Its movements fast, unnatural, dislocating itself with each lurch forward. It made no sound but left deep gouges in the dirt where its hands passed. Rob ducked into a ditch, pulling Jess down with him, just as the thing passed, and for a moment, it paused, tilted its head, as if sniffing, then moved on. They didn't move for 10 minutes. When they did, Rob whispered, "That's the collector." One of the road's own. It follows violators. You get seen breaking a rule, it collects. Jess could barely breathe. What rule did we break? Rob's eyes locked on him. You stopped walking at the tracks. Jess's blood went cold. That little hesitation, Rob said, that's all it needs. They moved again, more cautiously now. Eventually, they reached a split in the road. To the left, a billboard that once advertised a lake resort, now defaced with red paint spelling "Forgot Her." To the right, a rusted street sign reading "Morrow House, 1 mile." Rob didn't hesitate. Right. They followed the road until they saw it. A Victorian home that looked preserved, too intact, too alive. Even the grass was cut, porch light flickering. A swing on the patio moving in the still air. Jess whispered, "You sure this is it?" Rob nodded, hand on his knife. "This is where the writer lives." They approached slowly. The closer they got, the more wrong it felt. Not evil, just observant. Jess reached for the doorknob, it turned. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, warm light, the smell of cinnamon and ink. A man sat at a typewriter at the end of a long hall, his back to them. He hadn't moved, didn't acknowledge them. But as Jess stepped inside, the man spoke without turning around. "You've broken too many rules, Jess. Now you'll have to write your own." The typewriter was still clacking, even though no one was touching it. Jess stood frozen in the doorway, heart pounding as the sound of the typewriter echoed through the strangely warm house. The man seated at the far end of the hallway, tweed vest, gray hair slicked back, hunched shoulders, had not turned. But the carriage of the typewriter clicked and shifted with every phantom keystroke, punching out lines that vanished before his eyes could read them. Rob placed a firm hand on Jess's shoulder, grounding him. "Don't speak unless spoken to," he murmured. "And don't cross the rug." Jeff blinked. "What?" Rob didn't answer, just nodded toward the long Persian rug running the length of the hallway, its pattern writhing ever so slightly, like it was breathing. They stepped inside. Each footfall on the hardwood floor creaked, but the rug remained silent. The house smelled of candle wax, dust, and something deeper, like pages soaked in meat. As they approached the figure at the typewriter, he finally stopped typing. The silence hit like a gunshot. "You brought him here," the man said, still facing away, "even though you know he's not ready." Jess swallowed. "Who are you?" The man chuckled, a sound both tired and deeply amused. "Names don't last on these roads, son, but you can call me the archivist. That's what the road calls me. And now, maybe, it'll call you the same." He turned. His eyes were completely black, not demonic, just blank, as if the irises had dissolved into an endless corridor. "You've seen the strands unraveling, haven't you? The signs, the blood that isn't yours, the roads that double back on themselves." Jess nodded slowly. The archivist stood up and motioned toward the study behind him. Inside, a room filled with shelves, every one of them packed with journals. Leather-bound spiral notebooks, school-issued diaries. Some were charred, others were leaking ink onto the floor. Rob stepped inside, but Jess hesitated. "They're real," the archivist said, reading his mind. "Each one belongs to someone who walked the back roads." Some made it out, most didn't, but they all wrote, because memory fades here. Stories don't. Jess finally entered. The room was colder and dimmer. Candles lit the space in flickers, casting warped shadows. He ran a finger along a cracked spine and winced. It felt like skin. "Rule books," the archivist continued. "Every survivor leaves theirs behind. Every trespasser writes a new page. Every death pens a warning." He pulled one down and handed it to Jess. It was his own. Jess opened it. Inside, the pages were filled with ink, but the ink bled into shapes. First the gas station from night 1, then the collector, then the body of the sheriff, and then his sister. Her face smiling, the last time he saw her. Underneath, one line. You forgot her birthday. That was enough. Jess slammed it shut. I didn't mean to. The archivist just nodded solemnly. That's not how the road works. It doesn't punish evil. It punishes neglect. The little things you didn't think mattered. Why me? Jess asked. Bewire any of this? The back roads need believers. You stopped believing the world made sense, and the road invited you in. It feeds on that kind of doubt, and once you break its rhythm, it starts writing back. Rob finally spoke. We came for the map. The archivist raised an eyebrow. You want the gate? Rob nodded. Jess was still lost. The gate? There's only one true way out, the archivist explained. A crossing point, but it shifts. Every 7 days it moves, based on the newest rule violated. Right now it's sitting beneath the old water tower on Mills Bend. But that place doesn't exist, Jess said. Not on your maps, the archivist agreed. But it's marked in here. He handed them a folded sheet of yellowed paper, more like vellum than parchment. On it was a crude but unmistakable set of landmarks. The Boneyard Motel, the burnt church, the tower with no bell. All connected by one rule: never look back after the 6th mile. Jess felt a chill climb his spine. What happens if you do? He asked. The archivist's smile cracked wider than natural. Then something follows you. Rob folded the map. We'll take it. One condition, the archivist said. He pulled a rusty knife from his desk and held it out to Jess. You write the next rule, and you write it in blood. Jess recoiled. What? Rob didn't interfere. The archivist continued, eyes locking onto Jess's. You've broken enough of them. Time you contribute. The road doesn't let freeloaders walk forever. Jess took the blade. His hand shook. He looked at the blank page at the back of the journal the archivist had handed him. His own. He pressed the blade to his palm. Warmth. Pain. Copper in the air. Then slowly he wrote, Rule 73. If a voice tells you to stop walking, keep going, even if it sounds like someone you love. As the blood dried, the letters sank into the page. The archivist nodded, pleased. Good. It'll remember that. Then the typewriter snapped to life again, typing a new page without input. Jess looked. It simply read, Mile 4 awaits. The road to Mile 4 felt wrong from the first turn. It wasn't just the map, crudely drawn in symbols and rules, scribbled in a language older than English. It was the way the air thickened, the light dimmed unnaturally despite the afternoon sun, and the hum of cicadas fell into an unnatural silence. Jess drove slowly, squinting at the narrow trail ahead. The trees on either side were too tall, too still, almost like sentries watching their intrusion. Rob sat beside him, clutching the rule sheet. He read aloud again, almost in a whisper. At Mile 4, there will be 3 signs. 2 point to survival, 1 leads to silence. You must not follow the silence. What the hell does that even mean? Jess asked, his voice tight. It means we better pay attention. The car crested a ridge, and there it was. Mile 4, not a marker, not a milepost, but an intersection of sorts. A clearing opened, and 3 gravel paths branched from the dirt road. Each one had a wooden signpost, weather-beaten and crooked. Jess stopped the car. The engine ticked as it cooled. The forest around them exhaled a chill. They got out cautiously. The first sign read, Wayward Hollow, 2 miles. The second, The Marion Farm, 1.7 miles. The third, No Return, 0 miles. This one wasn't painted, it was carved, deep and splintered, into the wood itself. Beneath it, someone had etched, Shh, silence. Rob whispered, It's the third one. That's the one we don't take. Jess nodded, but something about the Marion Farm sign made his stomach clench. The name, it tugged at something in his memory. Does that name mean anything to you? Rob asked, as if reading his mind. Jess hesitated. No, but it feels familiar, wrong kind of familiar. They agreed to take the Wayward Hollow path. As they turned the car onto the new trail, the gravel crunched louder than before. Each pebble echoed like it was falling into a bottomless pit. Shadows deepened unnaturally. The GPS had died an hour ago, and now even the compass app showed spinning madness. Then the forest changed. Figures began to appear, not close, not moving, just standing, far off between trees. Blurred silhouettes. Some wore wide hats. Others seemed too tall, all completely still. Jess tightened his grip on the wheel. "Do not stop the car," he muttered. Rob had gone pale. "They're watching." They drove for another mile before the trail ended in front of a rusted metal gate hanging open. Beyond it stood a white house, Victorian style, with sagging steps and windows covered in thick grime. A sign lay flat on the ground, its letters flaked but readable. "Welcome to the Marion Farm." Jess and Rob froze. "I thought we picked the other path," Rob whispered. "We did." The forest looped them. Jess killed the engine. They had no choice. The car wouldn't reverse now, not on this cursed trail. He could feel it in his bones. The road wouldn't let them go back. They stepped out. The silence was overwhelming, broken only by the wind chimes hanging from the porch. Though there was no wind, Rob pulled out the last of the rule sheet. "It says if we end up here, don't knock, don't ring, just listen." So they stood, staring at the door, listening. From inside came a faint lullaby, a music box melody, twinkling and broken. Then a whisper, a child's voice, almost sing-song. "They never listened. They knocked. They bled." Rob grabbed Jess's arm. "Did you hear that?" Jess nodded. "We should go, now." They turned, but the path was gone. Where the car had been parked was now a wide cornfield, swaying though there was no breeze. The forest had swallowed the road. Behind them, the house door creaked open. A woman stood there. Her dress was from another century, torn and dirty. Her eyes were milky, blind, but locked directly onto Jess. "Jess Palmer," she said calmly. "You brought the map," Rob whispered. "We never told her our names." The woman smiled, impossibly wide. "I've been waiting," she said. Then from behind the woman a man stepped into view. Jess's father. Except he had died 5 years ago. He looked young, unaged, dressed in the same boots and coat he'd worn on his last hike. His eyes were hollow. "Son," he said, "you finally found it." Jess stumbled back, shaking. "You're not real." The woman reached into her apron and drew out a black stone key with veins of glowing red. She dropped it on the wooden porch. It pulsed once. "Take it, and the road will open again," she said, "but only one of you may leave." Silence. Rob looked at Jess. Jess looked at Rob. The lullaby restarted, and the cornfield began to part, row by row, as if something enormous was moving through it, coming fast. The road didn't just vanish, it split, like a wound cracking open across the earth, bleeding silence and fog. Jess had seen oddities before, roads curving back on themselves, exits that reappeared with different signs, but this was something else. The pavement had cracked and split into 2 diverging trails, both paved identically, both leading into identical stretches of pine forest cloaked in mist. Rob stood beside him, breathing hard, map in hand. "It's not on the map. None of this is." He wasn't wrong. The hand-drawn map from mile 4 showed only a single road continuing forward, annotated with chilling footnotes. "Do not stop for screams. Ignore the black billboard. If you see Bonnie, run." Jess tried to reason with what lay ahead, but logic was now a lost language. The mist shimmered with an oily film, almost like heat rising from asphalt, except the air was frozen. His breath came out in wisps. Birds didn't chirp. No wind stirred the branches. It felt dead. "This is the choice," Rob said slowly. "Like Clyde said, the road splits after mile 4. One path leads deeper, the other doesn't lead anywhere human." "Which one's which?" Jess asked, already knowing the answer. Rob didn't reply. They chose the left. The pine trees grew unnaturally straight along the road, each one evenly spaced, as if arranged by unseen hands. Jess kept glancing at the forest edges, sure something was pacing them. The windows of the van had begun to fog, not from temperature but from the inside out, as if the air itself wanted to obscure the view. The first billboard appeared 30 minutes in. It was black, just like the map warned. Nothing was printed on it, no branding, no image, just matte black paint, warped with water damage, as if whatever had been on it had melted. A second followed a mile later. This one had scratches across it, deep enough to gouge into the metal frame. Not claw marks, symbols. "I think that's Appalachian script," Rob muttered, tracing one of the shapes in the air. "Or something older." Jess didn't answer. His attention had drifted to the ditch beside the billboard. Someone had stacked hundreds of dolls there. Not new ones, ragged, wet, dirt-caked, all turned toward the road. A third billboard came next. This one had words, "We see you, keep driving." Jess slammed the gas. They hit mile 5 just after sunset. The sign was half buried in gravel and twisted like something had tried to yank it free. A rusted gas station appeared on the left. One pump, one broken-down convenience store, the windows taped over with yellowed newspapers. A flickering light inside spelled "Open." "That's Bonnie's," Rob whispered. Jess's grip on the wheel tightened. He didn't want to stop, but the rules from Clyde's map stated, "You must stop at Bonnie's before mile 6. Don't accept food. Don't accept kindness. Pay in quarters only." There were 6 quarters taped inside the map. Jess pocketed them silently. The bell over the gas station door rang before they even opened it. A woman stood behind the counter. She was maybe in her 40s, auburn hair in a tight bun, a face too smooth to match her eyes. The smell of warm soup filled the air, but there were no pots, no food, just scent. "Welcome," she said, her voice syrup thick. "You're almost there." "We're just passing through," Rob replied. "Everyone says that." Jess placed 1 quarter on the counter. "We just need gas." Bonnie smiled all teeth. "Then that's all you'll get." The air shifted. Jess could feel it in his jaw, like a pressure change before a storm. Behind Bonnie, something moved behind the curtains to a back room. Not a person. Not a shadow. He left 2 more quarters and backed away. "Come again," Bonnie called, voice laced with a hum that didn't sound like a human throat. "Or don't. It won't matter." Outside, the fog had turned yellow under the gas station lights. Back on the road, Jess drove in silence. The GPS was long dead. The map had no more notes after it just showed a stretch of road marked with symbols, repeating spirals and mirrored question marks. Jess realized something strange. They hadn't seen any other cars. Not in hours. Not even parked or abandoned. No wrecks. No tire marks. It was as if they were the only vehicle that had ever passed through. "Jess," Rob said quietly. "Do you hear that?" A faint sound echoed from far ahead. It was rhythmic, mechanical. A bell. Jess leaned forward. No, not a bell. A chime. 1, 2, 3. The van sputtered. "No, no, no." It died. All around them, lights came on in the forest. Not headlights, not flashlights, lanterns. Dozens of them swinging from branches. Each one lit up a face. Identical. Jess's own face. Jess's breath caught in her throat. The doppelganger standing across from her was not a mirror image. It was worse. It was exactly what she looked like when she was 16 and on the brink of suicide. Pale, gaunt, with dark hollows under her eyes and cuts running across her wrists. Old wounds. Long gone in real life, but reborn here like unhealed scars of the soul. It smiled with teeth too many, too long. Rob raised his flashlight, but the beam flickered violently, casting chaotic shadows along the trees and the creature's face. Jess grabbed his wrist. "Don't point it at it," she whispered. "It likes the light." The entity took a step forward, but not toward them. Instead, it walked directly into a nearby tree and disappeared into the bark as though swallowed whole. "What the hell was that?" Rob hissed. Jess didn't answer. Her knees buckled and she slumped against a moss-covered log, clutching the ritual map with shaking hands. They walked in silence for what felt like hours. The forest here seemed more tightly wound, the trees leaning together like gossiping villagers. Branches whispering secrets Jess couldn't quite make out. At exactly mile 5, per the map, they reached the signpost that points nowhere. It was real. A rusted, ancient pole stood in the center of the road, pointing in all 4 cardinal directions. But instead of town names, the signs read, "You should have turned back. It's too late. Who's leading who?" "This isn't mile 6, Rob scoffed, trying to lighten the mood. "Cute." But Jess was staring at the 4th sign. "This isn't mile 6, she repeated softly. "Is this another warning?" "It's some psycho's idea of a joke," Rob replied, though his voice was too tight. As they passed the post, the air grew colder. They heard a distant rhythm, not drums, but knocking. 3 knocks, then silence, then 3 again. Jess knew better than to answer. She remembered the rule, never knock back. But Rob, visibly disturbed, said, "It's like Morse code. You think it's someone else lost out here?" "No, I think it's the road talking to itself." The knock stopped abruptly, followed by a high-pitched laugh from the woods behind them, a child's giggle. They both froze. Jess wanted to run, but her legs refused. Then something moved ahead. Slowly, from the side of the road, came a creature unlike the others. It was dressed in the uniform of a 1970s gas station attendant. Red patch-stitched mic on the chest, but its face was stretched too wide, with eyes that looked like polished glass marbles. Its arms were too long, stranded. Jess recognized the uniform. "That's the guy Clyde mentioned, mile 6. "Do we run?" Rob whispered. "No," Jess said. "We wait. If it sees fear, it chases. If it sees resolve." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't know how it ended. The stranded walked slowly up to them, and without a sound, handed Jess something wrapped in oiled cloth. Inside was a key carved from bone, etched with the words, "To end, go back to where you began." "What does it mean?" Rob asked. Jess stared at the trees. "It means we're trapped in a loop. This road, it feeds on motion. The more you go forward, the more you unravel. But if you go back..." Suddenly, the air turned thick. The stranded shrieked, ear-splitting, and ran into the dark. And from the trees behind them, the knocking returned. But it was closer and faster. Jess turned to run, but stopped dead. The road behind them was gone. It wasn't just swallowed by trees. It had never existed. The road was gone. Where asphalt once stretched behind them, there was now only a yawning, ink-black abyss. Utterly silent, utterly final. Jess stared back in disbelief, the steering wheel trembling in her hands. The headlights illuminated no dust, no rubble, just void. Rob leaned forward in the passenger seat, his mouth ajar, eyes locked on the impossible. There was no mistaking it this time. The road wasn't just disappearing. It was being erased. "We're not going back," Rob whispered. Jess swallowed, throat dry. "Then we go forward." She pressed the gas. The tires groaned against the cracked pavement as the car rolled into the next segment of darkness, headlights slicing through the void like a pair of desperate prayers. But the road ahead wasn't a road anymore. It was something between memory and nightmare. Flickering pieces of gas stations they'd already passed, loops of trees from mile 1, even the glowing diner sign from mile 2, now reading, "Welcome back, Jess." She hit the brakes. "That's not real," she muttered. "We're hallucinating." Rob turned to her slowly. "No, we're remembering." "What?" He reached into his jacket and unfolded the map, the cursed cryptic thing that had gotten them this far. But now it was different. The lines were bleeding, the symbols rearranged. At the center of it all was a circle, a crude face, a hand-drawn road looping back into its own throat. "Look at the sign again," Rob said. Jess raised her eyes. The sign now read, "You can't escape something you built." The road has become unstable in time and space, a metaphysical trap folding in on itself. They are no longer traveling through a physical place, but through psychic echo. The sky is unnaturally still, devoid of stars. The radio crackles with fragments of past conversations. They pass by the same wrecked red truck 3 times. Every marker on the road now feels personal. Jess and Rob begin to notice the road is not just looping, it's reconstructing their memories. Snippets of childhood trauma, fears, and guilt manifest as illusions outside the car windows. The duo finds a resting spot, a long-abandoned rest area. Inside, graffiti marks the walls, symbols identical to the ones on the map. Rob finally explains what he had suspected. The backroads aren't a place. They're a construct of unfinished guilt, unresolved death, and ritual failure. Jess receives a final broadcast on the shortwave radio. It's Bonnie's voice, distorted, mechanical. "It ends when you stop driving away." Jess begins to lose grip on time. She flashes between her childhood, being in a car with her mother, and the current ride. Trauma about her sister's death surfaces. Rob becomes increasingly quiet, almost resigned. He seems to remember more than he lets on. They stop at an abandoned ranger station, half buried in kudzu. Inside is a wall of missing persons photos. Most are familiar. Rob's face is there, so is Bonnie's, and Jess sees herself, aged 30 years, eyes empty. Beneath it, a phrase scratched into the wood. "The stranded don't die, they dry." Jess pulls out the key Bonnie gave her. It fits into a locked drawer beneath the wall of photos. Inside, she finds a VHS tape labeled Jess 12. The light from the TV flickered like a pulse in the darkness. Jess stared at the screen, breath shallow, as the VHS labeled Jess 12 began to play. The image was grainy, warping in and out of sync, but what it showed was unmistakable. Herself, sitting in that same room, looking at the same screen, speaking the same words she just had. "I've been here before," the Jess on the tape said, her voice layered with static and despair. "If you're watching this, you won't remember yet, but you will. We all do, eventually." Jess's stomach twisted. She lunged forward and hit pause. Her reflection in the black screen did not match her movement. It lingered half a second too long, just long enough for her to notice, just long enough to whisper her name with her own voice, but not from her own mouth. Behind her, the candle at the ritual circle guttered and flared. She turned slowly. The walls pulsed. The floorboards breathed. Reality was buckling. From somewhere deep beneath the room came a low rumble, like a freight train underwater. The symbols drawn in chalk began to glow faintly, reacting to the surge of energy. Jess stumbled back, mind racing. "I have to finish it," she muttered. This is the end, or it's the beginning again." On the back of the VHS box, a sentence had appeared that hadn't been there before. "Stop the 13th. Stop what? The 13th what? Attempt? Ritual? She flipped through her notebook. Pages she didn't remember writing now contained maps, cycles, dates, and a terrifying revelation. She wasn't the first Jess to reach this point, and if she failed to stop the 13th, she would become the next failed Jess. Another ghost. Outside, the roads were shifting again. A horn blared. The black sedan, the one she saw in State 2, driven by a man with no eyes, was back. Its headlights cut through the cracks in the walls. She had minutes left, maybe less. Jess lit the final black candle and recited the lines she remembered from the last loop, words in a language not her own, etched into her dreams. And that's when she heard her own voice, live, not on tape, coming from behind her. "Don't finish the ritual," it said. "We've tried. That's what traps us here." Jess turned. There were 2 of her now, and both were terrified. The 2 Jesses locked eyes. Mirror images of the same soul fractured across failed loops. "You can't trust the recordings," said the second Jess. You can't even trust me. The roads lie. They bend your memories. They rewrite who you are. But the ritual, Jess started, was never meant to release you. It feeds the roads. Every attempt, every blood offering, every whispered name, they're feeding it. A sound erupted from beneath the floor. A scream without breath. The walls cracked. The candle flames twisted into claws. A choice burned behind Jess's eyes. Complete the ritual and risk becoming one more lost fragment, or destroy the cycle forever. She grabbed the VHS. She stepped into the circle. She made her decision. The room was engulfed in a deafening white flash, and then silence. When the light faded, the room was empty. No tapes, no chalk, no candles, just an old television screen flickering faintly in a static loop. Outside, the black sedan turned off its engine. A new figure stepped out, young, confused, holding a broken GPS and a note that read, "If you're reading this, it's your turn now. Thank you for staying with us through every twist, whisper, and shadow of back roads. If you're still here, maybe you too have seen the signs." This story was inspired by the roads we never take, the silence between highway exits, and the terrifying thought that sometimes the map lies. If it made your pulse race, or made you glance twice out your window tonight, then our job is done.